Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. It's such a pleasure today to be here with 5th District Santa Barbara County Supervisor and the rare Triple Crown Chair, SBCAG, Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors, and SBCERS Chair, Steve Lavagnino.
Yeah, it's. I'll tell you
Wow.
what. And this week I'm feeling it because Tuesday was Board of Supervisors for what, a good 7-8 hours. Next day was the retirement board. The next day was SBCAG, and I am very happy to have a day where we opened up the Guadalupe Dunes Park today. So did a ribbon cutting out there. Got a Boys and Girls Club event to go to, but I don't have to chair any meetings today. So today's a good day.
Yeah, and you got outside. That's what matters.
Yeah, that was a great day. And in Guadalupe, I wore a jacket. First time ever I had to take it off because I was burning up out there. But yeah, we opened up access. It's been closed since last year due to the flood. So all the folks in Guadalupe now get to get out to the beach.
That's great. And, I'm really looking forward to our conversation today because I've seen you over the years. You're a little supervisor's legend. You've been around so long. I've been around. And,
Yeah.
I cover mostly South County, but here we are. We're going to talk about all of it. And so to it. And we're going to talk about your friend, Doss Williams, later in the podcast and what happened with that contest. But we'll
Looking forward to
it. Okay, so let's start, Supervisor Lavagnino, with this meeting you referenced. I wasn't there for the whole meeting. I was there for about 3 hours, and it went longer. It was the South County, the North County, the public comment, the deliberations, all that stuff, developer presentations about their projects before you for rezoning to meet the state mandate for housing, for part of the housing element. Let's just start right there, okay? And I know you're a North County supervisor. You're making decisions about all this, but what's your take? What did you think of these developer presentations? Where are we at from your perspective?
Yeah, so first off, it is kind of weird because I am a North County guy and we don't really have to do much rezoning. None in my district, some in Bob's. And a lot of it, of course, is focused right in the middle of Goleta. So I feel for Supervisor Capps because she's sitting here having to jam all this housing into her district and Joan as well. And, it's who's making the decisions on it. It's weird because it's Bob and I, and Doss are kind of talking about like what's going to happen in her backyard. It's kind of a weird situation. I would just say that, it's funny, housing, anytime you talk about housing in Santa Barbara County, especially South Santa Barbara County, everybody says, hey, man, yes, we have to have affordable housing. We've got to have places for our nurses and our firefighters to work. And then when you start picking on a location, it's like, kind of, this isn't the right spot, So if there's any way that we could build a bunch of affordable housing that did not create any traffic, didn't mess with anybody's view shed, I think everybody would support it. But unfortunately, that's a unicorn project that doesn't exist. And it does always remind me of something I remember Michael Tobes told me one time. People in Santa Barbara love housing. They just don't like high density or sprawl. So, the devil's in the details and all of these things. I thought all the developers did a really good job in presenting their ideas. There's going to be, no matter what you do or where you do it, there's going to be just significant impacts. And what I'm really worried about at the state, it's almost kind of like with the 101. We approved the project for the 101 and the city came back to Santa Barbara and Carpinteria and said, wait a second, man, you're doing this, but the impact is going out all these ancillary projects that we need to also build because this new thoroughfare is going to, cause all these other problems. With the state housing mandate, unfortunately, they're like, hey, you got to build all these houses, but there's not really money to do the sewer upgrades, the traffic, all those types of things. So I did like a lot of the presentations. I haven't made my mind up on any of them, but what scares me too is the part that I'm a little bit leery about is all these developers came in with these great ideas of, hey man, I'm going to have 5 miles of trails and we're going to have this pool area open. And it's not just open for the people that live here. It's going to be for everybody, right?
Yeah.
None of that's enforceable.
Yeah.
So what I'm really worried about is getting into a situation where we make these deals we move forward, and then the developer, as they do, come back and say, the market's changed. This isn't what I'm able to do. I know Supervisor Nelson's really pushing to get more than 20% affordable, and so is Laura. It would be nice if somebody did that, but unfortunately, the state law is 20% affordable, and it's really hard to get developers to do something when they can make money doing something else. So I don't know where this is all going to shake out, but there are going to be some definite impacts in the Southland.
Do you feel a little bit kind of not laughing because you're making the decision here, but a little bit tickled here? Because for so long, the housing element, the county put more in North County, in Santa Maria area. And for the first time, I think the state SBCAG said we're going to divide it, and you got to put more in the South County. How do you feel about that? Because like you mentioned the Tobes thing. We love housing here on the South Coast, but we love it like far away. So
right.
How do you
feel?
Like it in really like, hey, South County, you got to get this share now.
Yeah, I'm not that kind of guy where I'm relishing that too much. I think what's more important to me is that we get the job housing imbalance figured out. And I've come to the realization that I live in North County, I live in Santa Maria. I'm not trying to sell anybody on Santa Maria. It is what it is. Santa Maria is an agricultural community. We aren't going to be, I have people coming in me all the time, constituents that are like, we've got to get more high-tech companies in Santa Maria. Well, the problem is we don't have the employees to do that right now, right? We don't have that base. So trying to get people to move here for high-tech jobs that don't exist in Santa Maria right now is 20, 30, 40 years down the road. And that's probably not something a lot of people up here want to hear, but that's the reality. The high-tech jobs are in Goleta and Santa Barbara. And we've got to start putting housing where the jobs are. And otherwise, we continue with this. You get on the 101, and I have probably gone to Santa Barbara more times than anybody from Santa Maria over the last 15 years. And it's just a flood of people leaving Orchid and Lompoc, heading south for jobs. You go down there and work, and you head back. And it's not good for the environment. It's not good for family life. We've got to start putting the housing where those jobs are. And right now, that means Goleta. Back in the day, when they'd go to SBCAG and they try to split up the arena numbers, it was my dad and Joni Gray and those folks that would say, you guys don't want them? We'll take them. We'll build the houses here. That's had also an impact on Santa Maria, where I'm not interested in making Santa Maria any bigger. My motto is let's make Santa Maria better, not bigger, and needs to focus on that. But it's probably time that folks in that area had, but honestly, Goleta's been building a lot more units over the last 10 years than ever before. So it's not that they haven't been doing enough, but the state has come in and said this is what they want to see, and kind of tied our hands on a lot of this stuff. And unfortunately, we've got to do the best that we can with what we're mandated.
Last thing on this point, the state sent the county a letter. I reported it in my story, basically saying you have to complete this rezone process really soon, because if you don't, you run the risk of having your housing element non-compliant, decertified, whatever the term is. And the county, of course, split the process, the housing element, the rezones later. Does that concern you? I know there's a couple meetings in April here, or March, April. You're rushing. I mean, that threat, what's looming there, does that matter to you, or you feel like
here's the thing, Josh? It's like in politics. When does the state budget pass? On the last day, right? When does any bill in Congress pass? We're going to shut down the government at 3:00. It passes at 2:30. I'm kind of glad that there's something out there that is, really whipping us. Otherwise, we would analyze this thing to death, and we'd EIR it to death, and, we'd go through all the boards of architectural review 1,000 times. So maybe having that out there, while it is a threat to us, also at the same time, it might be a little impetus for us to actually do something and move forward. And I think our plan development department's trying to move us through as quick as possible. We're still doing our due diligence. And so I'm okay with that. And, like I said, if we didn't have that threat hanging over us, we probably wouldn't get the job done. So.
Yeah. Okay, good. Hey, I want to talk to you. You recently went to Washington, D.C. as part of your Santa Barbara County Association of Governments chair responsibilities. And I guess it's sort of a lobbying trip. You're meeting with Carbajal and other powerful congressional members and their staff and trying to get
Well, I'll
money.
tell you what, the highlight of the trip is always going to go see Salute. So, I've been going for 14 years since I've been on the board, and I'm either going as a member of NACO, the National Association of Counties. I'm the representative from Santa Barbara County, or when you're in the leadership of SBCAG, there's a trip that takes the chair, the vice chair, and the past chair. So this trip was really interesting because I got to go with Randy Rouse and Janelle Osborne. Janelle was in the middle of her campaign, and I've never really spent that much time with Randy, so it was really good to, kind of hear his take on the first district election, all that kind of good stuff.
Oh, yeah,
so,
he was. I'm sure he was a big fan of the first district supervisor.
yeah, I was like, Randy, tell me what you really think. Randy reminds me, not in age wise, and I'm probably the same age as Randy, but Randy reminds me a lot of my dad. The filter's pretty much gone, and it's a good thing. So Randy and I got along really well. What it is we're going back and just reminding our U.S. senators and our basically what we do is go to the Department of Transportation. We just remind them about, we've got $1 billion project on the 101, and we're trying to find other ways to fund different aspects of it. And also, there are ancillary projects. There's always Santa Claus Lane. There's different little projects that we have to get funded, and we're just looking for different pots of money. I will tell you though, I kind of questioned, how effective they were until the year we had the Montecito debris flow. And within, an hour, Scott McAlpin and Tom Fayram had the Army Corps of Engineers, and it already built that relationship. That's what this is all about, like getting to know the right people so that when you do have an emergency, you call that person. And they had instantaneous, boots on the ground and action. And so, while we didn't have, we're lobbying to get more funding for the 101, the reality is we're just trying to meet the players, get to know who they are, get to know so that they know who Santa Barbara County is. So when we have an issue come forward, it's not like, well, who are you guys? They know us.
Yeah. So was there a lot of discussion about 101 or the ancillary projects? Or?
Yeah, honestly, like 101's so close to being fully funded. I think this time around with the California Transportation Commission, we've got fingers crossed that this is the last big chunk. This will be, when we get done with this is going to be basically the citizens of Santa Barbara County through Measure A putting in about $250 million of our own tax dollars. But we've leveraged that to get $750 million of state and federal funding. And I'm really proud of that. I think that's a tip of the cap to Margie Kern, who runs SBCAG, her staff, as well as, a lot of county players, some of our lobbyists, Don Gilchrist with Thomas Walters and Associates. They do a really good job of keeping our name out in front and putting our projects at the top of the list.
Yeah, and her staff being Lauren Bianchi Clement, also, awesome. As you noted in the SBCAG meeting the other day. So we want to make sure staff gets the credit because staff does so much of the work.
You got that right. You know that, Josh. Staff's where it's at. Yeah, Lauren, she's governmental affairs manager, and a lot of times that's just it's a PIO. When we were in those meetings, she knew the details inside out, upside down, and backwards of all of our projects. And sometimes we get asked, we're not going in and talking to Senator Padilla. We're talking to his transportation guy from his staff. But that's where the decisions are made. That you got to know the right person that sometimes lives in the basement of the transportation building, but that's the guy that actually figures out what the funding is for Cachuma Lake, So it's good to have those connections always.
Yeah, definitely. So 101, I know, has been one of your priorities to see that project through completion. And you don't make that commute from, Ventura, Oxnard into Santa Barbara, but you're well aware of it. What do you think? It's pretty cool. So some of those change, you're going through and you look at it like, wow, it's so much better. It's not done yet, but how would you describe
every time I drive through? See, I'm driving through differently because I know most people are driving through like, when's this thing going to be done? I'm driving through, this is $1 billion worth of work. I've got a construction project going on in my house. It's a bathroom remodel that may end up being about $1 billion away, but I can't get my freaking bathroom tiled, and it's like, I drive through those overpasses, all the overpasses that were redone, not to mention all the ancillary projects that are done just off the freeway. It's amazing. And it is a feat of engineering that this thing is actually going to get done. And it's one of the things I'm proud of, because when I got on the board in 2010, for decades, the 101 was always talked about as widening. A North County jail was always talked about, and they never happened. And so I'm glad that, and it wasn't me, it was just timing, but it was me kind of also pulling on that end, saying, hey, let's get this done. Let's make it a priority. We've had to sacrifice in North County. We're sending a lot of our street repair and road maintenance money down to the 101 until that project's finished. But I believe in Measure A. The people spoke loud and clear that the 101 was the number one priority for transportation, whether you live in North County or South County. And it's not just because I don't drive it all the time, but our agriculture guys, all their trucks are going to LAX. Mm-hmm. It's the lifeline for Santa Barbara County, and I want to make sure that it's working at its optimum.
Yeah, it's great. It's getting closer. More construction. It's never ending, but it's going to be so much better eventually. So, hey, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk some county business, and let's talk cannabis. Okay, so
I haven't heard of it.
There's a lot of controversy around the county's cannabis ordinance, as you know, and we're not going to rehash everything, but let's go into the most recent thing where there was this discussion regarding changing the way that these operators pay the county, whether it's through gross receipts. There's some question about whether they're reporting it accurately or square footage. We know civil grand jury, people not liking cannabis odor, the whole politics behind it. We know this is a huge thing. You voted against going to square footage. So talk to me about why you think that's the best way.
First off, when we were first talking about the ordinance, I thought square footage tax was the way to go. And I mean, when our consultants came in, they said there's a couple different ways you can go. You can go gross receipts, you can go square footage, and square footage might be really good for greenhouse indoor growing. But for outdoor growing in North County, square footage is it's just not fair. I mean, you could get a whole crop wiped out through weather. I mean, like we just had all this rain that we, weren't really anticipating. Get a lot of mold, got a lot of mildew, and you're going to lose half your crop. And so that was my initial reason why I thought, okay, let's just go to gross receipts. That also makes sense to me. But now, the more I've been involved in this, there is no silver bullet that, this is the right way to do it. What I think is funny to me, that I find humorous, is that, this push to go to square footage tax, you've got other counties that are doing square footage that are like, hey, man, how does that gross receipts thing work? Because this isn't working for us. Because there's a couple reasons why. One is, when we talk about cannabis, everybody just thinks of one thing. It's not one thing. It's not a strawberry where all the strawberries are going into strawberry pie. Cannabis can be grown, like up in North County, there's a project up in Cuyama right now where they're talking about doing 150 or 200 acres. All of that is just going to get mowed down almost like like you see in Iowa, with the big combine. It's just chopped up and it's used for oils. Whereas opposed to, you're talking about in Carpinteria, where you're growing something indoors and it's, really high end, they might be selling something for $1,000 a pound. The guy up in North County might be selling the same, it's not the same plant, but it's called cannabis, for $100 a pound or $200 a pound. And I just think trying to tax it at the same rate just doesn't seem fair to me. Mm-hmm. So the big problem with gross receipts, though, is the transparency and the self-reporting. So we have to fix that. And I wish Harry Hagan, for me, there's no straighter arrow in this county, no more straight shooter than Harry Hagan, our treasurer tax collector. Mm-hmm. I think he, for me, is the ultimate. So I believe when he comes to speak to us in April, he feels now that his group that does auditing, so they also audit TOT tax, property tax. He's the taxing auditor, the guy that does those examinations. So he feels now comfortable that he's got a way to be able to go into these books and find out exactly if they've overpaid or underpaid or where exactly they are. So if we can get a gross receipts tax that can also be that Harry tells me is he feels comfortable auditing, then I think that's the way to go. And the reason why I think that is if you look at the charts over the last 5 years, well, over the last 3 years, we're the #1 revenue generating county in cannabis. Over 5 years, we're #2. So I almost look at what other company that's #1 says, hey, I want to change the way I'm doing business. I remember, we had Coke, went to New Coke and went like, big mistake. It's like, we're Coke right now. Why do we want to? And I get that the people that don't like cannabis, don't like anything about it, the way it's taxed, the way it smells, anything. I understand that. But I don't want to change just to change it. I want to change for something that's better. And I think I might be convinced with Supervisor Hartman. I thought she had a really ingenious new idea of coming up with some sort of a hybrid where everybody has to pay this square foot tax that's kind of like an alternative minimum tax. Yeah. And then there might be, a share on gross receipts. The other thing I like about gross receipts is when the market goes up, we share in the success of that. When the market goes down, the county also takes the impact. And so we had a couple years where we had, $15 million, 12, almost $13 million in receipts. That's great. And that's when the market was up. When the market goes down, the tax goes down. So yeah, I want it to be fair and I want everybody to pay their fair share. And I think with Harry Hagan running shop on that we're going to be in a good spot. But I could also be convinced that, part of a square foot tax would really make sense. But I think just going to a straight square foot tax isn't fair to me. And I don't want to change just to change. And I know, a couple of supervisors have campaigned on I'm going to get rid of that tax, and that's great. But let's change it to something that makes sense. I just don't want to change just to change it so we can say, yep, checked off that campaign promise. So I'm fine with changing the tax. I just want it to make sense. And I've sat in a room with our CEO's office and county council and the smartest people at the county and said, okay, how do we figure this out, right? But the problem with cannabis, like I said, is this plant can be turned into $1,000 a pound or $100 a pound, and there's no real nationwide indices out there that says, okay, cannabis today is being sold at $475 a pound, so you can't really put a price on it. Yeah. So it makes it really difficult to tax.
You mentioned something that I kind of want to circle back on. You said, there are always people who are just not going to like anything about cannabis. And that's really kind of an extra layer of opposition to all of this, that whatever happens, people are going to like it, are going to dislike it a little bit more because it's cannabis.
I understand that.
And you, Steve, I guess I want to go back a little bit. You used to be a registered Republican. You're not anymore. A conservative guy, right? Cannabis, I'm sure you're quite aware that there are people who believe cannabis can be a gateway drug to worse drugs. And there are certainly families that are affected horribly by alcohol, by cannabis, and other drugs. They affect families silently. People don't see it outwardly, but the people at home do. When did you become such a staunch supporter,
such an advocate for the
cannabis? And I know you're going to say, it's not cannabis, it's revenue, and I'm a budget guy, right? But
not only goes so. But,
okay,
so that's okay. So let's talk about that. So first off, I think now, I think Oklahoma, and I don't know if a place is more conservative than Oklahoma, but Oklahoma is legalizing cannabis. Yeah. Go on Congressman Salud Carvajal's Instagram page. He's carrying around a sack full of cannabis. Those days are gone. I mean, there's going to be, when I walked into the grand jury room, at the age of the people that are in there, I understand that there's a segment of the population that's just going to be totally opposed. Yeah. So first off, I don't think that there's any way that you can have a conversation where you say we're going to keep alcohol legal and cannabis illegal, and point to all the problems. It was so funny to me up here in Santa Maria that, a lot of my constituents that were older, they come up to me at parties and they've already had a couple of gin and tonics and they're sitting there talking to me with a drink in their hand, telling me about the woes of, cannabis. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not sure what you're doing right now is actually healthy for you either. But so there's a couple reasons why. One is the overwhelmingly majority of people support it. It went to the voters, and the voters approved it. And I think grown-ups should be able to make grown-up decisions. And that's, if you want to enjoy cannabis in your own home and you're not hurting anybody, that's a decision you can make, just like if you, have a few shots of tequila at home. But for me at the county, where it became personal was, well, not personal, but like you said, and I'm going to go back to this, is that when I got here, oil was they were 5 of the top 10 taxpayers in the county, oil industry. We have now 1 in the top 20. So we didn't want any oil, right? Nobody wants to develop the Gaviota Coast. You don't want to build any resorts. Trying to build anything in this county is almost impossible. And so at the same time, I'm getting pressured. Hey, we got to address homelessness. We've got to fix the mental health crisis in this county. We've got to repair the roads. We got to widen the 101. We got to fix the potholes. We've got veteran services. We've got veterans out here that aren't getting the love that they need. And I saw people that were totally supporting all of the programs and let's do this and let's do that and let's do this, but said no to every revenue projection or providing instrument. So I honestly did look at cannabis as, revenue. Here's what it is. Like I've been pushed many times. It takes 4 votes of the Board of Supervisors to put a sales tax, to put a tax on the ballot. And I have been pummeled for 10 years by my colleagues to vote to put a sales tax on. And I always told people, like, I don't want to, raise taxes. I just don't think it's a good idea. This tax is actually paid by the cannabis growers, so I'm not paying it. So, my neighbors aren't paying it. I'm okay with that. But I understand that it has had unintended consequences. But you have to go back and remember what the consequences were that we were told was going to happen. When we first started, the cartel was coming to Santa Barbara. We heard that it was going to drive down property values. We were told that, it was going to drive down tourism. It was going to kill the wine industry. And none of that really happened. Property values continue to skyrocket. Tourism is rebounded after COVID. So what are we left with? We're left with smell, and it's a definite impact. I mean, I drive through Bealton and I'm like, holy crap. Okay. That smells. I wouldn't want to live right next to it. I agree with you. But I think we're at the point now where there is the best available technology now is out there. And I've actually experienced it walking into a greenhouse in Carpinteria where they invested a bunch of their own money to put in the best available technology. You can stand in the middle of this acres and acres and acres of cannabis and you don't smell it. We have to, as a board, move forward and start implementing that. And I think we're on the path to doing that in the next month or so, that we're going to require that. So it's been a bumpy ride. Both sides have really dug in on this thing as far as, those that support it and those that oppose it. And unfortunately, it's caused a lot of friction. I've lost friends over it. I've lost political support over it. But, at the end of the day, I got to do what I think is right. And I feel that the benefits outweigh the negatives, and especially in my district. And so, that's the conclusion I came to.
Yeah. And you didn't lose your supervisor seat over it, though, either.
No, I didn't have any. I haven't had anybody run against me for the last 3 times. So as my dad says, either you're doing a good job or you've got it so screwed up nobody else wants to do it. And either way, I'm good with either way. So
have you had anyone, Steve? And I don't want to go like too personal here, but I mean, have you had anyone like negatively impacted by the use of cannabis in your life, like to the point where you're like, we need to step in, or you've seen it affect you personally in any way?
No, I haven't. I'm always my door's open. People that want to come in and share their stories with me, I'd love to hear those. I think in anything that you do, whether it's any medication, I mean, look at all the pharmaceuticals that are being, you can't watch TV anymore without getting 35 different drugs thrown at you. And honestly, they all have a tremendous amount of side effects.
Yeah.
I think we've done a good job of, originally it was going to be like, hey, these retail stores are going to be everywhere and all the kids are going to be in there. And, the problem has been the retail's been slow to open. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's almost impossible. It's much more difficult for an underage person to get inside of a dispensary than it is to get alcohol served to them or cigarettes. So, it's,
I was,
I'm not, and Josh, I'm not out trying to convert anybody like, hey, go out and start smoking. But I do believe that when the people vote and say, hey, I want to do this and it's legal in this country, that I'm not the pastor or the priest of the 5th District. I'm the county supervisor. And my job is to try to put the rules in place to make it happen. So, that's what I did.
Yeah. Yeah, I went to one dispensary to cover the story opening, and they took my ID. I was like, "Oh my goodness, I'm going to be on record."
You gotta have ID to go to a dispensary, but not to vote. So, still working on that one. Yeah, that's kind of interesting.
You're not one of those people.
We're not. I got to be honest too. I go to dispensaries, and I'm always the youngest guy in there. It's kind of weird.
Yeah,
it's not a bunch of kids. It's a bunch of.
Well, I mean, I think that's the thing too. It was supposed to make it cheaper, and the kids, the college students will still get it from their friends because they can
absolutely
get cheaper than.
Well, and the black
it's
market
taxed. No, sorry.
Yes, right. Well, that's what was so interesting was the state came to us and they had put this huge tax on it, and they told us, hey, as the local government, you should really try to keep that tax low. Well, you guys already killed it. So, yeah.
So let's stick on revenues and the county budget. Maybe you could start a Lompoc space tourism program, to fund the county.
I want to figure out how we're going to make $200 million on childcare. That's what I didn't know how that one worked, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't think anyone knew how that one worked. But let's talk a little bit. You're a budget guy, right? You're definitely somebody who has been so valuable and so important. And we talked about you're on the SBCERS board as well. So let's talk about the county budget. And are we in a bad position? I know the pension is, that's a weird thing because everyone has
it's really easy to explain.
Pension liability. It's 800 million, and you're like, oh my goodness, and it's like
put it all into perspective.
Yeah. So talk to me about pension reform.
Yeah. So one of the cool things about the district that I represent, it's 99% incorporated, right? So almost all of my constituents live inside a city. So my job is a little bit different than Bob Nelson, Laura. When you have a lot of folks that are unincorporated, Dos got all of Montecito, you get a lot of phone calls, your street lights out, the trash isn't getting picked up, this road needs to be fixed. I don't have a lot of those phone calls. So I get to focus on the budget and some big picture item type of things. And so I have kind of been a little bit of a budget hawk and really get down into the down and dirty. And it does bother me when people say, oh, the county's broke, or, look at all the unfunded liability you have. So I'll just tell you, we ended last year with $72 million in reserves. Our strategic reserve is fully funded at $44 million, which is, according to accounting standards, that's where we need to be. I don't think people have ever figured out that we don't make widgets at the county. So we're not a regular company that if things go bad and the revenue goes down, we're going to go bankrupt. We have 4,500 employees. You might end up with 4,200 or 4,000. And we've done that before when times were tough. We had to cut people or positions. But the county's in strong financial shape. I got to say, I applaud my colleagues. I'm from a conservative district where people don't really like spending money. So there's not a lot of pressure on me to, expand programs. And I know that, I've worked with 11, this is now going to be 11 other supervisors, right? I've kind of burned through a bunch of colleagues, and all of them, had pressures on them to, especially when, this is the interesting thing now. Board of Supervisors used to be North and South fighting with each other, and, Republicans fighting against Democrats or conservatives against progressives. Really, the battles that I've seen that I think are interesting are two Dems, because one wants to, hey, I want to really increase this program, well, it costs money. And the other dem that maybe might be a little bit more budget conscious is like, we can't afford that, but they're being pressured because, you don't want to live these values, we've got to. So that's where I've seen a lot of this go. But what I wanted to say about my colleagues is they've done a really good job of allowing staff to tell us, this is the amount of money we can spend. And, we got to keep monies in reserve. We got to keep money in the rainy day fund. And they've done a really good job of that. They don't have to. I mean, 3 votes of the Board of Supervisors, they could empty that strategic reserve tomorrow and spend it on their pet project, but they don't. And that's not easy to do. And so I appreciate that. On the Board of Retirement, what's really interesting and where we're going to see the county just really change course is there is a huge payday coming to the county. And I know my CEO doesn't like me talking about this because we never want to talk about good times, but I want to talk about it because I think it's important for people to understand. During the global financial crisis, the pension system took a massive hit because at that time, they had a lot of their assets in equities and, the stock market crashed and we were in a really bad shape. The county is then responsible for backfilling that loss. And for the first 2 years, they almost did it like a credit card. You owe this, we just make the minimum payment and finance it next year. And then the next year we put a little bit and then finance it again. Well, finally, under the leadership of Harry Hagan and some others, we decided, hey, let's take that loss, bundle it together, like $700 million, and bundle that together, and let's pay it off over a period of time. So we've been making our regular payment that we owe for retirement, and then we've been paying more to pay off that unfunded liability. Yeah. So just to put it into perspective, this year we spent about $140 million on county retirement. In 2029, when that's paid off, our payment to the retirement board will be about $30 million. So we're going to be pumping about an extra 100 to 110 million back into the general fund. And the general fund, the discretionary general fund, is about 360 million. So when you're talking about throwing in another 100, 110 on top of that, it is really going to change the course of the county's finances into the future. So, people that came before me made these decisions. I helped, but I think we're not looking at a cliff. We're actually, and what's interesting is because it's 5 years off, it's actually 6 years off from our last 5-year outlook. So it doesn't show yet. When we do our 5-year forecast now, we are finally going to see that item get paid off. And then, finances are really going to turn around and we'll be able to do a lot more interesting things that we've kind of had our hands tied on.
How do you react when you hear, it's usually the conservatives, it's, the, dare I say, like the Andy Caldwells, those people who are always just criticizing the county for pension reform and unfunded liabilities. And, when you explain it, and I know that from covering the city of Santa Barbara, is that it isn't as though they're just like letting this pile up and they're like, what are we going to do? They have a plan, and it's the same plan that you just outlined, and they're addressing it. When you hear the sort of the scary tactics of these conservatives who were like, the county can't manage their budget, you being a former Republican, a conservative, how do you navigate that? Do you mean, can you just tell them, shut up, stop doing it?
First off, that's not what drove me away from the Republican Party. I'm still a fiscal conservative, but what drove me away is all the social issues, just the craziness and the whole Trump thing. I just was like, peace. I can't deal with this. This is not the Republican Party I joined under Ronald Reagan, right? I'm an independent, and it's so free not to be on a team. Like I don't like this team thing. I want to be responsible for what I'm doing. I've made enough mistakes on my own that I can handle that. I don't need some president screwing things up for me where people are like, oh, you're with him, Yeah. So here's what I found is that what motivates people? Fear. That's the number one motivator. And if you say, hey, man, the county's actually tackling these fiscal issues like an adult and addressing them, how do you raise any money and generate any, fervor against that? Andy's job is to foment people and to get them riled up. And you can't do that when you say, hey, they actually have a strong strategic reserve and, they're tackling, that doesn't work. So you have to kind of keep and it's not just him, it's a lot of people that are still using the arguments from 20 years ago, where it's like North versus South, and there's this divide, and these conservatives up north. Bob Nelson is representing the same district as Peter Adam. You see him at the meetings. Bob's very level-headed, pragmatic. He's got his opinions, and he's going to stick true to his values, but he's not there to throw anybody under the bus or drop bombs on anybody. I don't want to go there and call people names. Now, what's funny is I do have constituents up here that are like, Steve, you're not, you're not mean enough, or you're not fighting enough. And I'm like, but you know what? That's how I got $8 million for Guadalupe.
Right.
To clean out the river. If I had been a complete a-hole for the last 14 years and been calling everybody, the twisted sisters and all this stuff, I'm not getting that. I can't deliver for my constituents. I'm in the minority. I understand that. So, and I've been called a half loafer for that. You settle for half the loaf. And I'm like, yeah, I'll take half a loaf. It's better than no loaf.
Yeah.
And so, and then when things come up that I don't agree with, I kind of look at my job as trying to make them less bad than I think they are currently. So I've had a great working relationship, I think, with all of our former supervisors, from the most progressive to the most conservative. There's times when we got along and times we didn't. But I look, I've turned off. I don't listen to talk radio. I don't watch 24-hour news cycle. I got my dad off of, I go over there and my dad would be screaming at the TV. And I'm like, what are you doing? Calm down, watch something else. I think it's kind of been the tear down of our community, actually, in our country, is this 24-hour news cycle where you just get two people yelling at each other about something that, they just pick a side. We could do that right now. It's like, okay, you be pro-cannabis, I'll be anti-cannabis. Which side do you want to be on today? We'll just rip each other. It could be entertaining, but it's not good for anybody. And I'd like to see us move away from that. And I think our board, I give a lot of credit to Greg Hart. I mean, Greg's such a calming influence, man. When he left, it really bothered me. Not because, I don't get along with Laura. I mean, Laura's fine. It's just Greg was just such an adult. And it's great to just sit there with him. And, we'd kind of be getting a little bit out of our comfort zones, and he'd just bring us back, and Mr. Rogers style, and everything was good again.
Yeah, Greg's really good at context. Like,
Yeah.
yes, we're all worked up on this. But
Yeah,
let's step back.
Take a step back.
This has happened before, so let's all
Exactly, right? We can deal with this.
Yeah. You mentioned your father, Larry, and one thing that comes clear in this interview, and when I've watched you over the years, is you really love what you do. It feels like you have a passion for it. You're not doing it because you have to do it. You're not grumpy. There's a public service energy that comes out of you when you talk. So just can you talk a little bit about what's it's like to be a second generation public servant, and how that affects how you approach your constituents?
So my dad was mayor of Santa Maria for quite a while, and he told me a story about when he went to a League of California Cities, and all the mayors and stuff get together, and a guy raised his hand. He goes, man, the bad part of being a mayor is I go to the grocery store and somebody's asking me about this pothole, or somebody wants this light change. And my dad was like, I told the guy afterwards, what'd you think it was? That's what this is. I go to the grocery store, I get stopped all the time. I can't go anywhere. I'm going to an event tonight, and I'm going to have 10 people come up to me and give me 10 action items. And that's what I signed up for, right? So I know what it is. It's so funny because people look at the Board of Supervisors meeting, they're like, oh, you only work on Tuesday? And it's like, dude, that's my respite, right? I'm up there, nobody can bother me. It's fine, perfect. So it's, going to get your hair cut, going to the dry cleaner, going there, you get a vibe of the community. And what I love about Supervisor is you're here. I mean, if I have a problem with Salud, good luck. What are you going to do? You write them a letter or send them an email. If you don't like what I'm doing, you're going to come down to my office, or you're going to the Board of Supervisors, you're going to let me hear about it, So second generation's cool, but mostly I credit my wife. My wife hates politics. Didn't know anything about it. Didn't know my dad was the mayor, when we met. She just basically told me, look, I'm going to let you get into this thing and I'll support you as long as you don't turn into those people that I see And there's two things she hates that I know, politicians do this. You run into them somewhere, they're talking to you, and the whole time they're looking around for somebody that's a little bit more important than you, right? That they can go talk to. That
Yeah.
bugs me.
Usually they're like, "Where's Nick Welch?" No.
Yeah. Or where's that donor? Where's that guy who's gonna write a check?
Yeah.
Right? It's that, and then people that make political decisions instead of what's right for their community. And I've got one or two of those that I've made that I regret to this day. But the majority of the time, 99% of the time, I'm comfortable saying, okay, I voted for what I thought was the right thing to do.
I noticed on your county website, I read your bio. I actually did some research before this podcast, and you described your wife as beautiful. Not a lot of elected officials will integrate that into their public eye. You do. It's right there. Do you ever just go there and say, "How should I vote?" Or
how should I vote? Oh no. What's awesome is because we live in bubbles, right?
Yeah.
I noticed this when I worked for Abel when he was in the assembly. Is assemblymen hang out with other legislators, eat with other legislators, recreate with other legislators. They have no clue what's going on in the real world. Yeah. So what's funny is sometimes I'll come home and I'll go, "Hey, this is kind of what, we're thinking." She'll be like, "What? That's insane. Why would you even think that?" And I'm like, "Oh, really?" And then she says it from a real world perspective. I'm like, "Huh, yeah, that does sound really stupid. All right, we're not going to do that." But no, she doesn't really get involved too much in the politics. But her thing is just be yourself, be authentic, And look, I know I'm not for everybody. And when I first got in the job, you want everybody to like you. And then I realized, okay, after you're here a while, you do lose. The longer you're in office, you just lose. You make a vote, that person doesn't like you anymore. You make this vote, now that person does. Now you got two people that don't like you. And pretty soon, it builds up. And obviously, you got to make tough decisions along the way. But if you have that guiding principle where you're just like, okay, I think this is the right thing to do. I know I'm going to get flack, but this is the way I think it works. Then, I can live with it.
Yeah, good. You have to stand by your actions for sure. A couple more things. One of your legacies is this Stand Down Veterans program.
Yes.
And so I want to talk to you about that and your efforts over the years. I guess you have an annual event, but it's a program where you assist veterans. So can you talk about what that is and why that's so important to you?
Yeah, so that's probably the thing I'm most proud of over my entire tenure is, and it's so funny because it started so innocently. I was sitting on the couch watching an old rerun of 60 Minutes, and they were highlighting it started in San Diego. And, I'm watching this thing and they're doing this thing for veterans and, doing these things. And I'm kind of a cynical guy. So I was like, all right, and they interviewed the guy that was running it. And he said, the reporter said, "You actually think you can change somebody's life, by coming here?" And he goes, "Yeah, I do." And I was like, wow, okay. So I kind of investigated it more and I was like, hey, we have a big veteran base here. Maybe this is something I could try. So I invited some veterans to my office and I just bounced the idea off them and said, hey, what do you think? What can we do? And first year we did it, it was okay. It's now turned into this massive, and we have 500 volunteers. We get about 5 to 550 veterans that show up. We've now brought in Vandenberg Space Force Base. They've been an integral part of this. And what it is it centers around a one-day event that's held at Santa Maria Fair Park. Have to be a veteran to come in, and they check your social security number when you're coming in to make sure. And everything that you can imagine that you need is available there. I mean, from if you're down on your luck, there are showers, there's a free breakfast. There's a giant building that just is basically like a department store with free shoes, boots, and all this stuff's new. Free shoes, boots, jackets, bedrolls, sleeping bags, toiletries. We'll give you a haircut. We'll take care of your pet. We'll chip your pet, license, dog food, cat food, whatever you need. And you get a barbecue. It's donated by the Cattlemen's Association, cooked by the Santa Maria Elks. But then there's another building that's now even more important to me. I used to focus on that first building, but the second building is where I realized where the real change happens, and that's services. And it's getting people reconnected back into the community, whether that's through education, employment, mental health services. Just I'll give you one quick example. We had a guy come in, an employer brought a gentleman in, and he was a truck driver, and he had lost his license because he wasn't paying his child support. He had an issue there. In one day, we were able to bring him in. We had child support there, along with the public defender's office and the DA's office. They went over, they worked out an agreement. He made some payment. Then we were able to walk him over to the California DMV booth, and he had his paperwork, got his license cleared, got his job back. And he came back the next year and volunteered, and he was like, man, you don't understand what that did for me. I would have lost my job, would have gone down this rabbit hole, and instead, it's all worked out. So now what we do is we take all those folks that sign up for that, and I have an employee that basically spends almost all of our time just working on placing these veterans. We're going to be able to place 5 of them across the street here at Hope Village now, the new homeless buildings that we have right across the street from the Santa Barbara County government building here in Santa Maria. And it's been wonderful to see. We get 90-year-olds from World War II all the way down to folks that, and it doesn't, you don't have to be homeless. There are homeless services available, but it's for everybody. So you see the camaraderie, guys coming in and telling stories. And I've had so many guys come up to me and say, you know what? I never got welcomed home until now. It's really moving, touching, and it's a cool day. It's a really awesome day.
Yeah. That's amazing. We don't treat our veterans as well as we should in this country. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And people get left behind. And so this program is so important. It's great.
When you see a guy coming off the street, got a scraggly dog, and then you see him walking out, the guy's had a haircut and a good meal, and he's got somebody that's, another serviceman that's carrying his bag for him from Vandenberg. And the guy's even walking a little bit taller, We have transportation that brings people up from Santa Barbara, Carpinteria, Lompoc, bring them down from San Luis Obispo. So it's an amazing day, and, keeps people, and it gives the community an outlet. We want to help our veterans, but we don't know how to do it, right? So this gives them an opportunity to, whether they're serving in the chow line, or they're helping fold clothes, or they're caring for the animals, whatever it is, gives those people an outlet. I have so many people tell me, man, I got a lot more out of this than the veteran did, by servicing them. So it's a really cool day.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's definitely going to be your legacy for sure, is your public service in
Not cannabis.
Speaking of, let's transition. Okay. So Steve, we had a shocking upset. You may have heard about it.
It was the lead into March Madness. It was the 16 seed knocked off a number 1,
Yeah, exactly. So, your friend, your colleague, Doss Williams, should have easily defeated Roy Lee, especially after coming off of the Laura Capps campaign. And he lost, right? Big upset. It was close. It should never have been that close. And everyone's still talking about it. And everyone's going to talk about it for a long time.
Forever. Yeah.
And I guess, I do talk to Doss. We have talked a lot since the campaign, during the campaign. We communicate. Eventually, we'll have an on-the-record conversation about what happened. But I want to ask you, what's your reaction to what happened? Roy Lee upsetting Doss Williams.
First off, just as a lover of, I don't like politics, but I do love elections.
Yeah.
And so I follow elections like crazy, right? Did not see that one coming at all. Like, boom. I was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
So, and the way things have changed now, where it's like it used to be, remember, Republicans voted early and then Dems voted late, but now that Republicans don't trust mail-in ballots, so it's really hard to kind of tell. So when the initial number came in, first up, I was shocked that it was, where it was, but then trying to figure out, is he going to be able to rebound from it? But hey, big shout out to Roy Lee, man. I mean, I hope this kind of ends. It won't, but I hope it does kind of put a damper on this cynical take that even I have on elections. It's basically, I heard Karl Rove say one time. It was like, what are the three main things in a campaign? And he goes, well, the first two are money, and I can't remember the third one, right? So it's like, hey, money drives elections and politics. And I don't know how much Doss spent. I know how much he raised, but I think he ended up with money in the bank. So
he ended up with money in the bank that he was hoping to use for his next campaign, Steve, which is
that's not a good way to. You got to empty the holster, right? And then, but like I said, big shout out to Mr. Lee. I've actually called him, congratulated him. I want to sit down and talk to him, and it would be cool if it's always good to get another look. Like I said, I've had 11 other colleagues. This is my third first district supervisor. So
you've been labeled as there's a derogatory term, related to cannabis.
Doobie Brothers? That's derogatory?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Well, it's a great band, great music, but you two have been kind of linked together on the cannabis issue, and you two are friendly and professional colleagues. Was this the right call? Did voters get it right, Steve?
Oh, I can't say that. Oh, I would never say the voters got something wrong. I mean, well, I don't know. They voted for Trump, so tell me, do the voters ever get it wrong? So here's where I differ from everybody else on Doss. But look, I wasn't a fan of Doss when he showed up. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but when he ran, I was on LAFCO when he had the bill for IVCSD, right? And I was giving him all kinds of crap when he'd show up at LAFCO, and I was like, who is this guy? He comes in, tries to do an in around LAFCO and telling us what to do. I didn't like it. So, and cannabis had nothing to do with my relationship with Doss. Where I came to like Doss personally was, well, two things. I thought he's a really good family man. And for me, I've been around so many politicians that aren't, that was good for me. But I thought what was interesting about Doss, where he gets nailed, is people are like, he's a politician, right? The guy just a flat out politician. But the funny thing, when I look at him, I'm like, okay, let's take two examples. Montecito ring nets. A smart politician would have gone to the people and said, you're right. I'm going to fight for you guys at Public Works, and I'm going to try to make this happen, knowing that the Board of Supervisors wasn't going to approve it, right? And then blame the board and come back and tell the people, man, Board of Supervisors sucks. Public Works sucks. You guys are right. That's not what Doss did. Doss went and talked to the experts in our Public Works department and said, it's not a great idea, so I'm not going to push it forward. Well, it's not a smart political move. It wasn't the political move to do, but he came across what I hear, as you guys saying, arrogant, that he did what he thought was right. Same thing with Tahigas. The smart political move as a politician that I see a lot of people do is the environmental community doesn't want to expand Tahigas, right? They want to ship the trash out to Santa Maria or somewhere else, Riverside or Ridgecrest. And a smart politician, if Doss was a smart politician, he'd be like, oh yeah, I'm with you guys, knowing that we weren't going to do it anyway. But Doss then tells them, no, that's not the environmentally superior way to do it. The environmentally superior way is increase where we're at and quit shipping this stuff, taking our problem and giving it to somebody else. That's where I respect him, because I've never seen a guy, and I don't know, all I know is from the Board of Supervisors. But I mean, when you talk about the climate and environmentalism, I've never seen a guy live the value more than he does. He buys secondhand clothes, union made, made in America. He got on me because he was like, hey, is that a new suit? And I was like, yeah, it is. He goes, well, where was it made? I'm like, I don't even know. He goes, well, look. And I looked and I was like, Bangladesh or something. He's like, how can you do that? You can't. So some might consider that preachy and maybe that war on people. But this idea that he's like this ultimate politician, to me, was like the opposite. I was like, no, he's a bad politician. He's a good public servant, but he's a bad politician. But, there's a bunch of things that led to this, I think. One is, I guess there's, fatigue. I know I'm feeling it on my end of people that have voted for me for 4 and 5 times. It's like, okay, what else is out there? And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to leave, when people are I still feel I could go in, unchallenged again and do another 4 years, but I want to give somebody else a voice. the turnout was not good for him.
Yeah.
And if you look at Doss's politics, they are really geared more towards a younger, I think, voter electorate. And what turned up in D1 was skewed way older.
Mm-hmm.
And so those things weren't important to them, right? They're not concentrating on the issues that he was concentrating on. And so it was a what do they say, like a perfect storm of just a bunch of stuff. And cannabis, I'm sure, weighed on it at some point. I don't really think, I know some people are pointing, it's a referendum on cannabis, but to me, that was 4 years ago. You had a candidate with much better name ID and Laura with a bigger war chest. And, that's all she was campaigning on, really. And he beat her. So maybe it's another 4 years of it, and now people are more tired of it. I don't know, but I think it was just perfect storm of a lot of different things. And, the fact that people know that Roy's not a politician and just an average guy that just wants to do good for his community might have been appealing to people.
What do you think, Steve, of all the people who turned on him? So if you look at his endorsements, okay, up until this election, everyone endorsed him. Like everybody you can think, every name you can imagine. And if you look at it, he had the firefighters, he had the Democratic Central Committee, and he had Sierra Club, and maybe he had Planned Parenthood, but he had like 3 or 4 instead of
right.
Pat McElroy, Barney Malekian, Joyce Dudley, right? These people, these Democrats coming out,
right.
And you have others not being very vocal, not supporting him. Do you feel like, what do you think of those people? Did they betray him? Should they sat it
everybody
out?
does. Everybody's got their own self-interest in what they want to do. I think, Chief McElroy's was about the Montecito ring nets, right? Each one of those is kind of an individual reason why they got upset with Doss. Pat is convinced that the Montecito ring nets are the right way to do something. Doss is convinced the other way. And so this was a way for Pat to say, I think you're wrong. I don't think Joyce was really excited about, she's a registered Dem. How many registered Dems do you have there are district attorneys? Not a whole heck of a lot of them. They're most of the times conservative Republicans. Where she felt, I think, really slighted by the Board of Supervisors was, and I know, some people talk to the pay raise that was denied at the end, but I think more of it had to do with the whole idea of, when our board majority is really pushing a lot of criminal justice reform, and they were kind of pointing at her as, hey, these are all the bad things, our county does in prosecuting people and putting people in prison. And she was like, man, I've been on criminal justice reform my whole life. And so I think she felt kind of betrayed that they had thrown her under the bus. And so she's like, all right, well, my turnaround's fair play. Barney Malekian's an interesting situation for me because I look at Barney, I really love him. And at a time he was the cannabis czar and he took over Dennis Pizanich's spot. And it was so funny to me because I talked to him, I'm like, Barney, you spent your whole career putting people in jail and arresting people for this product. And now you're supposed to be the guy that's, so I don't know what his issue is or was with Doss. And I have no idea. But those are powerful people that carry a lot of weight. And endorsements are so strange. I've gotten myself in trouble with endorsements before. When I said that, I've made political decisions sometimes instead of the right thing to do, that's one I point to. I endorsed Andy Caldwell over Salud Carbajal, and that's not what I thought was the right person. But I made a political decision I wish I could take back, but that was his first, a first run. And I did something, unfortunately, it was probably in my best political interest. And I wish I could take it back. And I've told Salud that as well. And let me just tell you how good of a person Salud Carbajal is.
Yeah.
I endorsed against him for Congress. He's got a bill right now that's naming the Santa Maria post office after my dad.
Yeah.
You don't do that if you're a grudge holder,
Yeah.
Look, somebody endorses against me. I'm not naming crap after you. I might name the dump after you, but I mean, this guy is the ultimate, he knows how to do it. And, we've mended the fence and my favorite picture in my office is the two of us looking in two different directions on the board of supervisors, both really mad at each other over redistricting. But, we're friends. We'll always be friends. But yeah, Doss, obviously, he rubbed people the wrong way somehow. And, you do that enough times and it comes back to you. I don't see him that way at all. I see him in a totally different light. It has nothing to do with cannabis. It's just, I think he's funny just because he's going to come up and reference some 14th century, French theologian when we're talking about the housing element. And I never know how he gets these references in there, but somehow he does.
Yeah. I think the thing that I heard as a reporter, and you probably don't experience it because you're a white male.
Yeah.
And okay. I think what caught him was years of this sort of belief by a lot of people who don't have power, some of them women, of his political style of maybe punishing people, cutting deals. And then if they don't go a certain way, we know about the Montecito Planning Commission appointment and Susan Keller and that whole thing, and so
I'm not even familiar with that, but
I think there's your position, like he needed you, right? So you're going to hear all of the things you have to hear because you need to be an ally. And Doss is a complicated guy. Just, I used to
agree with that. He is a very complicated dude.
He's the underdog. He was the rabble rouser. He was the guy who was going to change the world. He was the radical progressive, and he was somebody who was rising, not part of the machine. He forced himself into the machine and became the machine. And I think the lesson there is you can never forget where you came from, because Roy Lee essentially outdossed him because he was the underdog.
The outsider underdog. Yes. It is weird that now Doss is the establishment, right? Yeah. Like, and I think that you kind of have to do that to make change. I think Doss understood that because I hear him talk about that all the time with the sheriff's Deputy Sheriff's Association. He's always telling young people, look, if you want to change the way we police in this country, become a policeman. That's the best way to do it, is change it from the inside. So maybe, that runs its course, is you are the rebel rouser, you are the underdog. And then, you rise up through power, you rise up, you consolidate power around you. And then the guy sneaks up on you and takes you down, and it's probably a lesson that's happened a million times throughout human nature. It's just the way it is. I think, I'm a fan of boxing, and a lot of times you see this happen a lot. Like the guy that's hungry, when Mike Tyson was young, man, he was unstoppable. There was no way to do it. Then all of a sudden you become the champion of the world, and you're staying in Vegas, and you're maybe staying out a little bit later, and you're enjoying the trapping.
Partying all night in Tokyo, and
and then the next thing you know, some dude that's been training in his basement, all of a sudden comes up and knocks you out. And there's definitely less. And I got to be honest, man, Doss has taken this extremely well, better than I would. He's really, he said that, I've got some soul searching I need to do. And I need to take a look in the mirror and see it. That'll wake you up in a hurry, that you're cruising along and you've been a member of the assembly before, and you probably have your sights set on Congress, and then you lose a re-election on a safe supervisorial seat. Whatever it is the reason, whether they're justified or unjustified, or people have an axe to grind, or whatever happened, I don't know. I don't know all the dealings of, like you said, that's what I talk about with diversity and inclusion, and people say, well, there's no inherent racism in Santa Barbara County. And I'm like, well, I would be the last one to know if there was, right? Like, it's not going to happen to me. Yeah. So I have to take people's word for it. So if women or minorities felt that he wasn't listening to them, or he was, taking away their power, then, I'll take that at face value.
Yeah. And I think that all the Doss haters should be aware that he could come back and never count Doss out. he could go away and come back and become our next senator or congressperson. Who knows? So
Idea.
he,
No,
he
I wouldn't. It's hard to bounce back immediately, and I think he's already said that he definitely wants to spend more time. He's got 2 little kids and and a wife, and he these jobs they do take a lot of time away, especially at night, and it'd be good for him to get back, get recentered, and who knows where we see the evolution of DOS. What's the next? I mean, there's plenty of jobs out there that'll pay more than county supervisor, so I think he's going to do fine that way. But I know he loves public policy and he loves being in the mix, and I can't see him just walking away and riding off into the sunset. So,
yeah. Well, those boxing upsets you always cite. Who wins the rematch? The one who lost the first time.
Yeah.
Always come back.
Yeah. And I don't think he'll come back and run for first district supervisor.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen. And I'm really curious to see, I would be really curious to see what Roy's plans are. Like, I mean, I almost felt like I could see him being like, what? Like, I got a restaurant. What are you guys talking about? Like, I wanted to run. I really don't want to I don't want to have the job, maybe I might be wrong, but it'll be cool to get
Jerry and I talked to him, newsmakers, and he's going to quit. He's all in. He's going to be there time. He's really looking forward to it, and it sounds like he's going to dive in. But as once you start making decisions, the honeymoon is over.
Well, that's the beautiful part of this is I know people, most of the votes were to punish DOS. But let's see what happens, because now you've got kind of a business-friendly moderate, right? And so not all the votes might not be the same way anymore. Now they're going to be like, hey, wait a minute. I don't even know who has Roy's ear or and hopefully nobody does. What would be really cool is Roy to come in and go, look, I'm going to do 4 years, go back to my restaurant, and I'm going to do whatever I want and not listen to anybody for 4 years.
Yeah.
Because I will tell you what's been really awesome for me is, and I was really advised against it, was to announce so early that I wasn't seeking reelection, right? As soon as I got sworn in for my last term, I said, I'm not going to run again. I can't explain to you what that load off is just like. Okay, not that you vote differently, but you don't have to do, you just really get freed up to be able to make decisions a lot easier of not what's the ramification 8 years from now, or my next reelection is Barney or Joyce, or, are they going to come after me, or what, if this person's going to, and it's the way it should be, just, I was talking with my staff guy today with Corey, and we were like, hey, maybe Mexico's got it right. A 6-year presidency with 1 term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hey, you're not beholden to anybody. You don't have to worry about your reelection. You just do what you think's right and get it over with and move on.
And when you're done with supervisors, are you done? You're just
I'm done. Yeah. I've had the pleasure of being able to work for a member of Congress. I do not want that job. And that is horrible on people's families. And I can't imagine being a member of Congress from California. I don't know how Salud does it. It's a lot of travel. It's just a nightmare. I don't like those issues anyway. And then the other thing would be like state assembly, and I have no interest in that. This is the best job out there, because you'll see people that term out in the assembly and the state senate, they want to come here. And we have former members of Congress that come in, they're serving on boards of supervisors throughout the state. You're one of 5. You get to, you're voting on every single idea that comes up, and you really get a chance to move your county in the direction that you think you see fit. So you got 4-year terms. You're not running every 2 years. It's really it's the best job out there. I've loved every day I've come into work, and I'm going to miss it when I leave, but I appreciate what Joe Centeno did for me when he left. He never called me. He never sent me an email. He never showed up at a meeting and said I was doing it wrong or this is the way I would do it. And whoever comes in and takes off after me, I'll be disconnected and I'll go work on veterans issues or something, and I'll volunteer somewhere, but I'm not going to be involved in any type of politics. I'm done.
Yeah.
Not to mention that it's a lot different than when I started. These people now are crazy.
Yes. Well, Steve, I think that everyone's going to miss your good-natured personality and your honesty and your genuine approach to the issues. But we still have a couple years, where you're going to be.
We do. I'm not leaving tomorrow, so I got 2 years and 9 months to go. So
You have a hand-picked successor?
I do not, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to open it up early. I hate these things like, oh, is this person going to run for this or that? I wanted to tell people 4 years ahead of time, look, if you're trying to figure out where you're going to go in your career or you want to do something, I gave people plenty of time. There's already like 6 or 7 people that have come in and talked to me and said, hey, tell me more about the job. I want to know more about it. A few elected officials that are looking this way. So yeah, it's going to be wide open. I haven't decided on, an endorsement yet and won't until we get real close. And I just hope it's somebody that, keeps a live stand down. And that's my major concern is I just want to keep that going. And, but the 5th district, when we talk about changing times, 5th district is not we say it's conservative, but it's not, it's way upside down Dem to Reap, but they are Hispanic Dems, which are more conservative. The district's, 85% Hispanic. So I would imagine that I will probably be the last old white male that represents the 5th district. It should be somebody of color and be interesting.
Yeah. Well, what a pleasure to talk to you. I greatly appreciate it. It's so fun.
Yeah. I've been a big fan of the podcast, and now, now I threw mine on there, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Steve, for all your insight on everything.
Hi, Josh.
It's been a really great conversation. So have a
All right,
great
man.
weekend. Thanks for making time.
Have a great weekend.
I'll see you soon. Take care.
All right. Take it easy.